What's up, YouTubers and plant lovers? It's Justin, and today I wanted to show you how I care for my wandering dude. Real quick, I wanted to thank my Patreon subscribers. If you're interested in supporting my channel through Patreon, please check the link in the description box below. And also, if you don't have the monetary means to be able to support my channel, please feel free to share my videos with any family or friends. Now, this is the Tradescantia zebrina. Historically, I know a lot of you have heard it called the Wandering Jew. There are many different reasons why a lot of people think that this plant got that name, from its ability to kind of like migrate west to kind of warmer, wet, kind of moist places, to it's thought to have a long-lived kind of life. But unfortunately, that nowadays is kind of considered anti-Semitic. So a group of people have gotten together to try and change the name, the common name, to Wandering Dude, instead of being so kind of mean. But there are different kinds of this. So I know a bunch of you have heard it called the inch plant, the inch flowering plant, the Wandering Dude, or the kind of lesser known or the more known that's kind of mean. And there's also the Wandering Willie, the Purple Queen, and then they call it the Spiderwort too. Now, it is a genus of about 75 species of herbaceous kind of perennial flowering plants, and it belongs to the family Commelinaceae. Try to say that one 5 times fast. A lot of these words are pretty hard, so bear with me as I try to sound them out and butcher them. But for this one, it's the Tradescantia zebrina. Now that you can kind of guess because the leaves do have a little bit of stripe, kind of some variegation to them. The real kind of spiderwort is kind of a greenish color, and then all the flowers have 3 petals, and they go, they can be either pink to violet to white, but they all do kind of have 3 petals. And they're found all over the place, really kind of from like southern Canada down through North America, all the way down to Mexico, Central America, and even the Caribbeans. So there is the Tradescantia ohioensis, the Ohio spiderwort that is kind of found in North America, and then the rest, you've got the zebrina, the fulminensis, and the pallida, P-A-L-L-I-D-A. Anyways, the pallida is the really kind of pretty all purple one, and then the fulminensis is kind of like the small leaf spiderwort, but they're all very popular houseplants. I mean, these plants have been around forever. And as I said, I know you probably know someone in your family who's had this. It's kind of known as a scrambler, and it's kind of like a vining plant that will kind of get really leggy. So pruning is very important for this plant as well. Now, for the light requirements, they are, when in their native environments, they're kind of found in kind of grasslands and shaded areas and fields, and kind of rainforest kind of down south, any place that they can kind of escape the light but get somewhat kind of bright indirect light but kind of stay moist, but not saturated. It's kind of their happy little zone right there. Now, as I was saying with the light, you definitely want kind of bright indirect light. And as you can tell with these colored leaves, if you get too bright a light, you will scorch the leaves and cause them harm and kind of kill the plant and make it die back. But on the other hand, if you have too dim a light, it will lose its variegations or its fractal patterns that some of these have. A lot of people think that looking at the plant, because of its fractal patterns, can kind of relax the mind. But, you know, looking at mine, it is very beautiful. And it is kind of a long-lived plant. But like I said, they do get kind of leggy. And some don't live as long. It just depends on what kind of species you have. But the care requirements for all the plants are just about the same, really. Like I was saying, the light is just kind of really bright indirect light. And if it's too bright, you will lose the variegation and scorch the leaves. you will scorch the leaves. But if you get it kind of right on the line and you give it really bright, indirect, kind of perfect light, it will produce more flowers with the more light you give it. But like I said, there is too much of a good thing and you will scorch the leaves. And if it does get too dim, you'll notice that the patterns and the variegations and the colors will all kind of start to fade, and it won't look as pretty as it really is supposed to look. Now, that being said, I have mine in kind of a northeast facing window so that he'll get kind of really ample morning light and then protection from the sun during the hottest part of the day. But some LEDs kind of work with them too, but you do kind of have to have quite a bit of them. Like I said, they like it really bright, but mostly indirect. And then going on to water, I would say that these guys are kind of picky when it comes to water. You got to be careful not to just get it directly on the plant because you can induce some kind of rot. But I go ahead and spray mine all the time and then kind of pour water down in there. So a little bit of water is not going to hurt, but if you constantly get too much on there and down in the crevices and everything, sometimes you can introduce rot. So if you are spraying it a lot and giving a lot of water, make sure you do have avid airflow so that it will kind of evaporate and dry a little bit, not just kind of sit in there and soak and invite disease and rot and all that kind of stuff with it. But like I said, they do kind of like moderate humidity, so you definitely want to keep a pebble tray underneath it so that water will kind of evaporate and go up through the leaves. And the soil, you really kind of do want it to keep kind of moist. Kind of like the consistency of a wrung out sponge. You don't want it to be saturated, and you don't want the roots to be sitting in saturated water all day because they will succumb to root rot rather quickly. But that being said, you do kind of want it moist throughout the growing season, but they do often enjoy a break in between watering. So you kind of have to get a feel for what your Tradescantia really does kind of like. Some like a little bit more, some like a little bit less. But once you find that happy median, your plant will be kind of right as rain and be happy. So don't forget, some are kind of found in the rainforest where they do get a little bit more, but they do kind of like damp, moist areas, but not saturated areas at all times. And I do kind of water mine mostly with distilled water, just because I kind of have it laying there. But sometimes I will give it tap water. But as you know, here in Kentucky, they do have very hard limestone-rich water that can kind of damage other plants. So I don't do that too often. Now, going on with the soil, as I said before, they don't like a whole lot of water sitting in the soil. So they do like a really kind of nutrient-rich but a really fast-draining soil, something with a lot of sand and organic compost in it really does kind of help your plant. So if they are outside, most places in the world, this plant is considered a very invasive kind of plant. So make sure if you're in zones like 10 and 11 down south, you be very careful where you put this plant. You want to keep it in a pot because it is kind of like mint and it'll kind of take over your yard, and it is very invasive. So be careful where you do put it because in all the hot kind of temperate areas that are moist around the world, you are going to have a problem with this plant kind of taking over and being invasive. So but if you're checking with the soil of your plant, the Tradescantias can pretty much be at home in just about any kind of soil out there. Typically with the pH, they like it around 5 to 6, so slightly acidic. But like I said, as long as it's quick draining and has a little bit of nutrient organic compost in there, your plant will be fine. Something I find that is really helpful with my plant that he likes is kind of even mix of perlite and sand with some kind of peat or humus, and then like a gardening soil is just a general reputable gardening soil, works really well with them. And I sprinkle in a little bit of lime, and then about a light kind of medium kind of handful of organic compost. And I find that the Tradescantias really like those kind of soil mixtures as well. Now with temperatures, typically what you're comfortable with, right around 70 to 75 degrees, your Tradescantia is going to be happy with as well. So I wouldn't go any lower than about 55 degrees at the bottom. They will not survive a frost, so don't forget them outside in the fall, or your plant will die back. They are considered perennials way down south, so with anywhere else in the world, they're going to have to be brought inside for the winter time. Like I said, anywhere from about 60 to 80 degrees is kind of right on the money for them, and they are happiest at room temperature, so they do make great, excellent plants indoors as well. Fertilizers, they are definitely not heavy feeders. Kind of a general all-purpose water-soluble fertilizer that's been diluted by half. And I feed mine maybe every other month during the growing season. And if you do have a really kind of heavy kind of feeding cycle for this plant, you will end up losing the variegations and it won't look as pretty. So don't give it a whole bunch of food all the time. And like I said, when you do feed, at most, if you're feeding once a month, you should be diluting by half. And if you're feeding every other month, you could probably go up to about 3/4. Now, repotting can pretty much be done anytime during the growing season. At least I've done that with mine. And basically all you want to do is kind of check the pot, kind of fill on it with your hands. And if you have a bunch of movement and it kind of gives a little bit, then your plant's probably fine. But if you're pushing on the pot and it feels really tight and like it's not moving a whole bunch, it's probably time to go ahead and repot because he's getting a little bit snug in there. So if that is the case, you want to at least increase the pot size by no more than 2 inches. So anywhere from 1 inch to 2 inches would be ideal. And like I said, if you're going to make your own soil, use the kind that I was just talking about. But you could get any kind of general kind of potting mix and add in some sand, some coarse sand, some horticultural grade sand in there. And that'll help with the drainage. But you could also throw some perlite in there too to kind of help with that. And then before you pot it, make sure you rinse out your new pot with some hot soap and water and a little scrub brush so it'll be all clean. And then add in new soil down to the bottom. And then you can trim the roots if they need it. And then you can set it down in its new container and then kind of build up soil around the sides and kind of pack it down and tamp it in there. And he'll be right as rain in there. Now, of course, after you repot, you do want to add a little bit of water to kind of make sure you rid the soil of any air bubbles that might wreak havoc on the roots. And if you don't tamp the soil down and don't add water after you repot, your plant may die back. So make sure you are tamping it down lightly to kind of anchor it in place and to kind of remove any other air bubbles. And then watering once again on top of it will remove any other of the remaining air bubbles down in there too. Now, as I was saying with the humidity during the growing season, it is about average to maybe a little bit high. I have a humidifier in there in the room that I have mine in, and it's really helped him a whole lot. But they usually like about average humidity. So if you don't have a humidifier, I would definitely get a pebble tray and set it kind of underneath the plant. Or a spray bottle and kind of come by at least every other day and spray your plant some. Now, if it's a large plant like this and you're spraying it a lot, make sure you do have a fan so some air movement will kind of dry that up. But they do like some humidity and their soil a little bit moist. Pruning is very important just because these vines will get really leggy over time and it will look kind of unsightly. So you can take pruning shears that are sharp and sanitized and kind of prune back the leggings, or you can kind of pinch underneath some of these leaves, and by pruning or pinching it'll cause the shoot to kind of send out 2 shoots instead of 1, which will increase the bushiness of the plant and make it look more full. So you definitely want to pinch off some of the leaves and some of the stems, or at least kind of cut them back where they get a little leggy, and that'll help your plant look more pleasing and more full as well. Now, after you go ahead and cut them back or you pinch them back, don't throw them away. Propagating Tradescantias is very, very easy. Now, what you can do, even though they don't like to be in a whole lot of water all the time, they propagate really well in water as well. So you can either get a new container and put moist soil in there and then put the cuttings on top of the moist soil and kind of anchor them in a little bit. And after about a month and a half, if you keep it really moist and in kind of a bright, warm area, you'll begin to see new shoots off of your propagations, or like I said, you can propagate them in water. Either way works really well, and it's very easy to propagate these plants. So if you go to a big box store like Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart and you see some of them laying on the ground, it's a free plant, so go ahead and pick it up. You may want to ask somebody when you're working there, but they are really easy plants to kind of propagate. And honestly, I kind of think that's where they got their common name, the one that we don't use anymore, just because they are very easy plants to kind of move around, especially if they are in warm, kind of humid environments. Now, one thing I did want to say about this plant is it does have a little problem. It is toxic. From the ASPCA, they have ruled that it is toxic to cats, dogs, and horses. So if you are down south, make sure you don't plant it anywhere around your cattle or your horses, because if they eat it, the sap inside can cause some digestive problems and irritations. And make sure that they are really meant for hanging baskets. So if you do have little ones running around, or a cat or a dog that's curious and always goes up and kind of nibbles on stuff, they really are perfect if you hang them up higher to where nobody can get to them. And that's why I have mine in a hanging basket, because as you know, I do have a couple cats and a dog. So if you do see any leaves falling down, make sure you do kind of sweep them up. But the problem lies on the inside of the plant with the sap. It can cause dermatitis or some kind of irritation to the skin if it does come into contact with you or your pets. So make sure that you do kind of keep it up high to where the little ones or the animals can't get to it at all. But I don't think that it is toxic enough to where it would kill you, but make sure that you are keeping an eye on that. And then finally, I wanted to end the subject with the disease and pest problems of the Tradescantias. They do have a wide range of problem with diseases, from leaf spot to botrytis to powdery mildew, and then of course root rot. Root rot is the #1 problem with these plants because people always overwater them. Now, you want to kind of stick your finger down in there and check the soil and make sure it is dry down to about 1/2 inch. If it's dry down to about 1/2 inch, you can probably go ahead and add more water. And if you're not sure, always err on the side of caution and wait a day or two before you water again. And then with the pests, you have everything from spider mites to mealybugs to aphids to whitefly to scale and thrip. So most of these can be washed away with a strong jet stream. So if you do think you have a problem with any of these pests, take your plant outside or stick it in the bathtub and use your detachable shower head, or under the sink and wash it out, or out back and spray it down with the hose. If the water doesn't work, you can use some isopropyl alcohol and apply it to a washcloth and kind of go over all the leaves and stems. Though if you do have a large plant like mine, you may be there for a while. But like I said, you can kind of prune it back aggressively, and that will make some of the removal of the pest a lot easier, and a lot easier for you to get up in there with your washcloth and your rubbing alcohol. Well guys, that's really all I wanted to say about this plant. Like I always say, it is a great, wonderful plant to have, but it does take a little bit of care, just like any other plant out there. And they are our potted plant pals. So make sure you do kind of do a little bit of research before you get these plants, and you do kind of keep them up high if you do have any little ones out there. But they do kind of help with stress and cleaning the air, so this is a good plant to have. They are really pretty, and they do get a little large, not too big, so they are perfect for kind of smaller spaces, but also make great focal points for any other place out there too. While you're at it, go ahead and leave me a comment and let me know what you think of this plant. If anyone in your family's ever had one, I believe one of my aunts had one that I always thought was really pretty, and I got the really solid purple one a long time ago, and it lasted forever. So like I said, they are great plants to have. And while you're at it, make sure you hit the subscribe button or the bell next to it. That way you'll know anytime I've uploaded a new video. You guys take it easy, have a good one, and don't forget, always plant prudently.